I didn't know it. It'd be better that way anyway. Okay, we're going to start. Here's one thing you can say about Jane Waldfogel for sure. She has the longest title of any professor in the history of academia. Here it is. She is the Compton Foundation Centennial Professor of Social Work for the Prevention of Children's and Youth Problems. How long did it take you to memorize that? She's not dealing with me at this point. She's also, though, a visiting professor at the Center for Analysis of Social Exclusion at the London School of Economics, and the idea of knowing about the UK weaves its way throughout her career. She's published several books and so forth. And she's co-chairing APPAM's next international conference will be in London at the London School of Economics, and be next June, so participation is welcome. You'll hear more about this. It's good to get a feeling for the range of her. You know, some people have their career, they focus on one thing, they do it 50 ways for the rest of their life. Jane has written on every topic known to any developmental scientist or social worker. Just listen to this. These are the titles of her books. She's Britain's War on Poverty, Inequality and the Black-White Test Score Gap, What Children Need, which is about support that kids need, not just in their families, but the families need support from social policy and so forth. Securing the Future, Investing in Children from Birth to College, and The Future of Children, which is about abused and neglected kids. So the breadth of her work is truly astounding. I've had a chance to work with her quite closely over the last year or so. She, of course, I'm the incoming president. She was the president and gave her right to be mean to me and tell me what to do and everything, which came very easily for her. And within a month or two, I was whipped right into shape, no problem. Yes, ma'am, was my main line. And the second thing is that we work with several other people in this room. There are 16 of us, about half left and half right of center, on a project trying to lay out an agenda that could be bipartisan on poverty, reducing poverty, and increasing economic mobility. We met 5 times. Jane and I talked frequently between the meetings, and when we wrote the text and it was time to comment on the text, Jane emailed to me 3, 4, 5 times a day with do this, do that, do this, correct this, correct this. And of course, I incorporated all of them right off the bat. I hid one that I didn't do, but so here's what I learned from working closely with her. First of all, this will shock you. She's exceptionally smart. Secondly, she is so skilled at this. It makes me mad because it's hard to debate her. About 2/3 of the stuff she says is based on a whole range of studies. And if you mess around and disagree with her, she'll start citing studies. And then what do? You know, especially like me, I can't remember any studies. So it is remarkable the extent to which she employs our professional knowledge and the way she constructs her arguments and the way she conducts her arguments. I saw that very clearly several times. And the final thing I learned, that she's very tough and she defends her positions very aggressively, and therefore you would be well advised never to argue with her, including what she's about to say. Jane.
So I can't say how many people have asked me in the last few weeks, oh, you ready for your talk at APPAM? You ready? You know, it's like, I think that's intended to be supportive, although it's sort of just the opposite. But I have to say the most nerve-wracking aspect of the whole experience is Ron's introduction. Because he's been saying now for months, I'm going to introduce you at APPAM. I'm going to introduce you at APPAM. I'm getting back at you. So I'm going to resist the temptation to talk about Ron. But maybe I can do that if I talk really fast in my slides. I can get to do it at the end. So this talk is modestly entitled The Next War on Poverty, and so I'm thinking ahead to the next war on poverty. And I'm thinking about, we're just about 50 years after the last war on poverty, so how well are we doing, especially in terms of equality of opportunity? What can we learn from peer countries? So that's the main focus of what I'm talking about. And what can we do to reduce inequality and promote opportunity when it comes to the next war on poverty? So here we are, 50 years after the war on poverty. There was a lot of attention to this at APPAM in the last few years. We remember President Johnson declaring here and now unconditional war on poverty in America. And I could not resist putting up the SPM slide, both in honor of Becky Blank, who was honored today and is the mother of the SPM, but also because we spent so much time, our group at Columbia, putting this data together. And I think actually all of us are here today, so we get to look at our slide one more time. So the dotted line on the bottom is the official poverty rate, and this tells you what happened with poverty since the war on poverty with the official poverty measure. And it looks like not much. There's some ups and downs, but basically poverty hasn't shifted over the last 50 years. If you instead take the supplemental poverty measure, a better measure, you take it back historically, anchored in today's living standards, it's a completely different picture, the top line. And in fact, poverty's fallen by about 40% since the war on poverty. And there's a big role for the safety net, which I won't show you in the interest of time. There's been a lot of progress on other types of inequalities since the war on poverty. There's the wonderful book by Sheldon Danziger and Martha Bailey, The Legacies of the War on Poverty, where you can see the progress in nutrition and health. You can also see in that book, they talk a lot about the civil rights area and the unfinished business in the civil rights arena. And you know, the events of this past year, this past week have made all too clear how much progress has not been made in the civil rights area. There's also issues around mass incarceration, criminal justice, issues around immigration. So there's lots of unfinished business. The part of the unfinished business that I want to focus on today is educational inequalities. And of course, Sean Reardon's work has called attention to this. Those of you who were up early this morning at 7 a.m. got to see Sean's graphs. I'm going to show just one of them in the interest of time. So this is Sean's amazing graph showing the 90-10 income gap in reading across a bunch of cohorts up to 2010, because it's been updated. This was in the book With or Opportunity. So this is the gap in reading scores between children whose families are at the 90th percentile of family income versus the 10th percentile in family income. Used to be about 2/3 of a standard deviation, went up as high as about 1 1/4 standard deviation. That's a huge gap. Very similar in math. I'm only showing you reading. Interestingly, there's a little bit of a downturn at the latest few years. There's a little bit of a turnaround, which I'll come back to later on. So there's this growing, what we call the SES gap in achievement, socioeconomic status gap in achievement, and this is occurring in parallel with growing gaps in family resources. And this is something that Sarah McClanahan documented in her PAA presidential address on diverging destinies. And Sarah was kind enough to give me a bunch of her slides, which she's now updated. Her PAA address went up to 2000, and she's now updated these to 2010. So this is the gap in mother's median age for families with young children. So it used to be back in 1960, whether you were a low-educated mom, middle-educated, or high-educated, there wasn't that much of a difference in terms of the age at which you had your children. So those 3 points are pretty close together. And what happens in the succeeding decades is you can see those lines pulling apart. And so the median age at birth doesn't change much for the low-educated moms, but starts getting increasingly older for the more educated moms. And so we see this opening up, these diverging destinies in something that we know that matters for kids. Having a young mom is not so great for kids. Same story in terms of single motherhood. It used to be that single motherhood was not very common, and it wasn't that strongly correlated with maternal education. Over the decades, that in turn, that widens out, so we have this divergence in single motherhood. So these kids are sort of doubly or triply disadvantaged because they've got a low-educated mom and a mom who's likely to be single and a mom who's likely to be young. And then here's the income picture. This is from the original 2004 paper. yes, there were income gaps back in 1960. Obviously, families that are headed by more educated parents have higher incomes, but look at the widening of those gaps in the succeeding decades. So this is the growth of the income inequality. So these kids are now, what is it now, quadruply disadvantaged, right? They've got young parents, less educated parents, less likely to be married, and much lower incomes compared to the kids with higher educated parents. So we've got these SES gaps in kids' achievement, we've got SES gaps in resources, and then we've also got the SES gaps in the investments in children. So this is a very frequently used graph from Greg Duncan and Dick Murnane's book, Wither Opportunity, showing the investments that parents make in enrichment expenditures for kids. And so there was already a gap back in the 1970s between families at the top of the income distribution, families at the bottom of the income distribution, but that widens out over the succeeding decades. And it's not, you know, it's especially because the families at the top of the income distribution are just investing like crazy, right? So they're just pulling away in terms of their investments in kids. Oops. And so parents invest not just money, but they also invest time in child care. And so this is the growing gap in time in developmental child care. This graph is from Bob Putnam's book, Our Kids, which actually sort of extends the work that Sarah had done in Diverging Destinies and kind of brings it up to the present and looks at a host of other investments. But it tells actually a very similar story. And so this is one of his graphs, which he kindly shared with me, about time spent in developmental child care. And here he's comparing more educated parents and less educated parents. And the point of the graph is that back in 1975, they're investing about the same amount of time in, he calls it goodnight moon time. It's, you know, reading to kids at bedtime, those kinds of activities. But you see the divergence in the succeeding decades. So this is all about the United States. This is all stuff happening within the United States, these growing achievement gaps, the growing resource gaps, the investment gaps, the time gaps. These are all larger in the United States than they were in the past. Is this necessarily the case? Does it have to be this way? Could it be different someplace else? So a starting point for that is to ask whether the achievement gap between low and high SES families in the US is larger than in other countries, or whether it's similar, and then to look, you know, developmentally, when does this emerge? Is it happening before school entry? Is it happening during the school years? We just had a symposium in this room about the preschool period, which is getting a lot of attention. And then is there something we can learn from different countries? So this was really the motivation for the book that I just finished that's out from Russell Sage, and I see that the room has been leafleted with flyers for the book. I did not do that. There are some gremlins from Russell Sage who scampered around the room and leafleted the seats, and I think those gremlins are named Suzanne and Aixa. So I did not do that. But I did write the book with Bruce Bradbury, Miles Korak, and Liz Washbrook. And we're using data from our 4 countries. So here are the data sets that we're using. I could spend my entire, 40 minutes talking about how we harmonized the data across these 4 countries, and so I'm not going to do that. This slide is it. So you're just going to have to take me at my word. These are 4 nationally representative data sets. They have pretty similar measures, which we worked really, really hard at harmonizing. Here are the cohort birth dates. You can see when these kids are born. In particular, we picked the Canadian cohort to be contemporary with the US cohort because we had that degree of freedom. For the UK and Australia, we picked the closest cohorts we could get. These are the ages when the children were assessed, and so what you'll notice is we've got 3 roughly common ages. In all 4 countries, we have children assessed at age 5. We also have children assessed at age 7 or 9, so that's our second time point. And then we have in all 4 countries children assessed at age 11, so that's another common time point. So we're going to measure socioeconomic status by parental education. So we're going to compare parents who have high school education or less. That's the low SES group. We've got a medium SES group. They've got something beyond high school, but they don't have a college degree. And then our high SES are people with a bachelor's degree or more. We could have used family income, and in fact, we did everything by family income. I should say that we have a technical appendix that's posted on the Russell Sage website that's longer than the book. And for those of you who want any details, you can download the technical appendix. At least one person in this room has read that technical appendix in detail. It's pretty engaging reading. I mean, it's pretty. I'm looking at Sean. He's not buying it. We went with education because it's a good proxy for permanent income. Income moves around a lot. We wanted something that measured families' resources on a more long-run basis. We can comparably measure it across countries, which is not always the case with income. And it's on the face of it an important input to child development. It would make sense that children with more educated parents should come into school more ready than children with less educated parents. The question is, why should that be any different across countries? That ought to be true in every setting. If you have a parent who's got a college degree, you should come to school more prepared than if you have a parent who just finished high school. That ought to be true everywhere. Okay, so I'm going to start through the findings. We've got 3 striking findings. The first one is Canada. So this is just dividing families into our 3 education bins, just, what's the distribution of families of young children in our cohorts. And you can see right away that Canada's an outlier because the dominant category for Canada is this middle education group. So the modal child in Canada coming to school has a parent with at least some education beyond high school. Only 22% of the kids have a parent with only high school or less. That contrasts with our other countries, where actually the modal category in the other 3 countries for families with young kids is that you have a parent with just high school or less. So we have a lot of low educated parents. Okay, then dividing children by how educated their parents are, what we're going to find across a host of measures is that, of course, resources are skewed by SES. They vary by SES. But the inequality is almost always going to be starkest in the United States. So this is being born to a teen mother. So the blue line is the United States. So the first thing you can see is that a higher share of children have a teen mother than in the other countries. But you can also see that the gradient is quite steep in the United States. So over on the right-hand side, only 3% of kids among the highest educated parents were born to a teen mother, but when you get on this side of the graph, the kids who have a low educated parent, 21% of them are born to a teen mother. So that's the gradient. There's a gradient in the other countries as well, but less steep, and it's much less prevalent. Similarly, for children living with both biological parents, kids are better off if they can live with both their parents, and especially if they're living stably like that over time. That's less common in the United States across the board. And again, you see this pretty steep gradient for the United States. From a high of 83% of kids living with both bio parents if their parents are highly educated, down to only 52% if their parents are low educated. This is the share with immigrant parents. Here the countries really vary quite a bit. In the United Kingdom, whether you have an immigrant parent is uniformly distributed. It's not correlated with parental education. In the United States, you can see that there's one group that's most likely to have immigrant parents, and that's the lowest SES families, the low educated. The opposite is true in Canada and Australia, right? The families where you're most likely to have an immigrant parent are the families with high education because they have selective immigration policies. So this sort of confounding of you have a low educated parent and a parent who maybe doesn't speak English or doesn't speak English proficiently, that's in the United States. This, I think, is my favorite graph in the book. So this is about reading to your kids every day. So obviously there's a gradient everywhere in reading to your kids. But look at those Canadians. I never knew how bookish those Canadians are. They're reading to their kids a lot. So the way you can tell is if you look over at this side of the graph, the lowest level of reading among Canadians, among the low-educated parents, they're reading as much as the most highly educated parents in the United States. So they're putting us to shame, right? They are really reading a lot of books with their kids. They do also, I have to say, they do also watch a lot of TV in early childhood. So I'm hoping it's educational TV up there. And they do have a lot of nice educational TV up in Canada, but they're also reading a lot to their kids. And then here's the income picture, which is a pretty sad one. Of course, in every country, families where the parents are more highly educated have higher incomes. That's the case everywhere, but that gradient is much steeper in the United States. And it's because families are pulling away at the top. They have much higher incomes than in the other countries, and because the families are pulling away at the bottom, they have much lower incomes than in other countries. So we've got more inequality across a host of resources. Unfortunately, the third striking finding is that our safety net does the least to combat this income inequality. So these kids are living in families that have the most unequal resources in the United States, but we do the least about it. So we do the least in terms of income transfers. This is the only graph in the book that we didn't do ourselves. So this is from some earlier work that Bruce had done with Marcus Yanti. So the light blue bars are poverty before the government does anything, before tax and transfer, before the safety net. So in the light blue bars, child poverty is pretty high in all 4 countries. It's 30% or more in all 4 countries. 31%